Wait, how does this work?
You just press the button.
This one?
No, not that one.
You're listening to Press the Button, a Ploughshares Fund podcast dedicated to nuclear policy and national security.
Everything seems impossible till it happens.
Everyone would be affected by a nuclear war.
Our government is planning to spend trillions of dollars to develop new nuclear weapons that we don't need.
You can't win a nuclear war.
We are all experts on nuclear weapons because we are all going to be affected by those nuclear weapons.
And here are your hosts, Joe Cirincione and Michelle Dover.
Welcome back to this 43rd episode of Press the Button. Today we have a special episode where I sit down to interview Ploughshares Fund's president and my co-host, Joe Cirincione. Don't worry, early warning will be back next week. Joe, you know I hate warm-up questions. You have some big news for us today.
I do, Michelle. We're using this podcast to announce my retirement. I'm going to step down as the president of Ploughshares Fund effective July 1st. It's been a great 13 years here at the helm of Ploughshares. The places I've gone, the things I've seen, the people we've helped. But it's all good things, right? All good things have to come to an end. And this has been one of the best things in my life, but it's time for it to come to an end.
I get to ask you the question we have all asked you in private. Are you sure? We really don't want you to leave.
This has actually been one of the nicest things about this process. We've been talking as a staff and as a board for almost 2 years about my retiring, and I am sure it's time to go. But it's so nice to have people constantly say, "Please stay." It's nice to feel liked and wanted. But for me, it's a combination of three things. And the first, of course, is very personal. It's my age. You know, I'm fortunate enough to look younger than I am, but I just turned 70. And it feels like it's time. I've been working since I was 13 years old when I got a paper route and was mowing lawns. And when I was 15 and a half, I got my first legal job. And I can't remember a time off, you know. And I feel like this is it. I want to go. And fortunately, this works, I think, at a right time for the organization. I think it's time to revitalize Ploughshares. I came in at a particular moment in the organization's history. We're at another particular moment. And I think this is a good time to be doing a transition, to be setting up, to be retooling Ploughshares for the new struggles, the new challenges ahead. And finally, I think those of us who have enjoyed careers, particularly in Washington, and are at the top of the pyramid, we have to know when to leave. We shouldn't just be clinging to our positions. Even though we're talking here in Washington where dying in office is a way that people think they will retire, I think it's up to us to understand that it's tough to climb all the way up from the base. It gets real tight in these top positions. And I feel that we have a responsibility to move over and make room for the next generation, the younger generations.
Before we get to that question about visions and opportunities, what can we share in terms of timeline, process, and transition?
Oh, yeah. So for all our grantees and for all our donors, you should know it's steady as she goes. I'm planning to run through the tape here. I'm not going to be sitting back watching spring training, you know, eating caramel corn. We're going all out all the way to the end. And the board has set up a very careful process to start looking at candidates for the next president of Ploughshares Fund. They have fortunately, a very strong field to choose from, and they're actually in the stage of interviewing them. I'm not actually picking my successor. I suggested my son or my daughter, but the board didn't really go for that. And as far as our grants go, well, you're the director of programming, Michelle. You should reassure people that, again, there too, it's steady as she goes.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of changes this next year in terms of the political context, clearly in terms of the organization, but Ploughshares remains committed to seeing a world free of nuclear weapons and doing what we can to get there.
Yeah. We just had a special board meeting where we gave out, about $400,000 in grants.
$400,000.
We have 2 more board dockets in my tenure. We're going to try to raise and grant as much money as we possibly can in the remaining 5 months.
Joe, you joined Ploughshares 13 years ago. In that time, we've given away $66 million in over 1,300 grants.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is out of a total of $114 million over the course of Ploughshares' lifetime. And something I found really interesting is of the...
So almost half, well, I guess over half of what Ploughshares has given away has been during my tenure. Well, that's great.
And of the 320 grantees, over 200 of them have been new.
Huh.
Which I think,
That's interesting.
speaks to your vision and what you were able to accomplish during your time here so far. And I think, one of the biggest changes was that you opened the DC office. But those are just numbers. What I wanted to ask you is, what have you been most proud of in all those changes?
I've been very proud of what we built here. I first learned about Ploughshares when I left government service. I was working up in the Hill for 10 years, and my friend and mentor, Michael Crapon, called me up one day and said, are you always going to be a congressional staffer? And I looked around the room, and I saw these people ready to draw their 20 or 30-year pension, and I said, yeah. I think I am. This is a pretty good gig. But he convinced me to come over. He had a project that he'd been cooking up with Sally Lilienthal of the Ploughshares Fund, George Perkovich, who was then with W. Walton Jones Foundation, and Pat Nicholas from MacArthur Foundation. And they had this idea of pulling together a coalition of groups to save the Non-Proliferation Treaty, that was up for a review and extension conference. So in 1994, they hired me and Sally. This is where I met Sally, our original founder of Ploughshares, and she gave me my first grant. That was my very first grant in the NGO world. And I developed a wonderful partnership with Sally and the other foundations, but Sally in particular, over those years. And I've worked at various think tanks since then, over 15 years in the think tank world. And throughout all of that, Ploughshares supported me. So when Sally died, and they decided to continue the organization, Roger Hale, then the board chair, and our dynamic executive director, Nyla Bolas, came to me and asked if I would become president of Ploughshares. And it wasn't a big search. They wanted me, which is very attractive, and to sort of pool together the things that I had done in the NGO world and on Capitol Hill and with the media, and open up this DC office and expand Ploughshares. So at that time, it was around a $2 to $4 million a year operation, depending on how much. And we've grown it now to somewhere between $8 and $10 million a year. We raise and give out. And the DC office has become sort of the operational hub of Ploughshares. The board wanted to become more operational, to do things ourselves in addition to giving to the grantees. And what we do is not independent work, but the thing that we do is to help bring the grantees together, to knit them together into a model very similar to what Sally had envisioned, and George and Pat, when they had this campaign for the MPT, a coalition of groups working together, reducing redundancies, accenting each other's strengths, so that together we could achieve something that none of us could individually.
In terms of those things that we were able to achieve that none of us could have achieved individually, what sticks out?
Well, we developed this model in the START campaign. When 2009, 2010, we built a campaign giving out money to groups, asking them to join together, and providing a platform for that cooperation. So right then and there, asking people to yes, do what they do individually, but share the information, develop calming messaging, develop a calming strategy, work together. We call this model impact philanthropy. And we developed it with the new START campaign, helped secure the extension of that vital arms control treaty. But then we really took it to a new level with the Iran campaign, Over 6 years, we raised and spent about $12 million to, one, convinced Iran and the United States that they could talk to each other, two, to help provide expert input into those negotiations, and three, then to defend the deal. I mean, because so much of this is about politics, not just policy. There was political opposition to this deal, not over what it did, but the fact that it existed at all, that the United States was willing at all to negotiate with an evil regime. And that model, I think that's probably the best organizing I've ever done in my life, is to pull that together. And it's still a model to be emulated and can be emulated in other fields. And I got to tell you, there's one other thing that I'm really, really proud of, and that's the Women's Initiative. I am more excited about the Women's Initiative we have than maybe anything else we've done here. I've been through a lot of movements, and I've seen them rise and fall. And I know that this current moment we have, whether you call it the Me Too movement or the struggle for women's rights, women's equity, it's rising, but it's going to crest and it is going to fall. So it is absolutely imperative that we seize this momentum when we have it and lock in structural change. So the kinds of things we've been able to do: start the Women's Initiative, commit to giving 50% of our grants out to women or women-led projects, forming new projects like Gender Champions for Nuclear Policy. This is one of the most exciting things in the field ever. Michelle, I'm preaching to the choir here.
You are.
So you know, it's because of, what we did as an organization, hiring a veteran, Terry Greenblatt, to come in and help us do it. And she hooks up with the young generation, you and Kara and others, and then our grantees, and pull them together into collective action, a collective brainstorming. I mean, you just came back from a
really incredible retreat in which just the eagerness for people to create change within their organizations and within the field and just create a better world through concrete, measurable action.
Yeah.
It was really something.
So it's bringing this kind of thing into the nuclear policy world and seeing it as important as the actual policy goals. It's the way we form the policy. Who is forming the policy? I'm very proud of that. And finally, then I'll stop. I'm really proud of the staff that we've assembled over the years. We've doubled or tripled the organizational budget and the staff over this time. And this is some of the best staff I've ever been privileged to work with. And you, Michelle, are a case in point. I mean, just really an outstanding rising star in the field. And when an organization can do that, can bring really good people and then empower them to do what they want and knit them together with their colleagues in the field, it doesn't get any better than that.
Joe, you've taught me a lot of things in my time at Ploughshares. And I think the one that will stay with me the most is that it's just not just about the policy. It's not just about the grants. It's about the people that you work with. And that's what creates change, and that's who's going to be working with you to get to that world.
And it's been my privilege to work with some of the best analysts in the national security space. I really do think that some of the brightest minds are in this nuclear policy space. Some of the most dedicated people who are really in it for the cause, not to become a consultant somewhere, not to cash in on their years as a staffer or as an official, but really to make a fundamental change, improving the world. I don't want to start listing people because I'll leave people out, but one of the most satisfying things for me in this position has been able to go out and raise money. Ploughshares raises all the money it gives away. We don't have a robber baron vault, for Scrooge McDuck-like. I can go dive in and bring a bag of gold out.
No, I'm waiting.
I know. Could we get one of those?
Where do we order that?
If anybody out there has one and wants to give us one,
we're here.
We're flexible. We're open to that change. So we raise it, and to be able to fund some of the brightest, best minds in the field, whether it's the bomb squad people on the front lines of the Beyond the Bomb movement who are out there organizing, or it's veterans like Hans Christensen at the Federation of American Scientists, sort of the man who knows where every nuclear bean is, a real nuclear bean counter, or the new organizations, as you say, we've started giving grants to over 200 organizations since I began, finding the best people out there and just giving them what they need to do the work they want to do. That's been great.
So what is your focus over the next 5 months?
Organizing and transition. So I don't like to sit still very much. And I've been an organizer my whole life. I've told you before, I organized a car wash where I worked when I was 16.
Of course
We
you
weren't
did.
getting paid enough. We walked out on strike. We all got fired. It didn't work out very well. But I think I've been an organizer ever since. I was a community organizer in Massachusetts in low-income housing projects in my 20s, and only moved here at the beginning of the 1980s to go to Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and then start working in the government and into the NGO world. And in all that time, I've always, felt this sort of fusion of organizing, expert analysis, and communications, getting the message out in the media, in world affairs councils and talks. And that's what I'm going to be doing over the next 5 months, because we're at another special moment in policy right now. I was hired in 2007, 2008 by Ploughshares because I've been writing about the new moment we had in policy with Barack Obama and the rising move to abolish nuclear weapons, epitomized by the four statesmen, Nunn, Schultz, Kissinger, and Perry, writing that the time had come to abolish nuclear weapons. And we were at a pivotal policy moment. We weren't able to realize all the potential of that moment, fell far short, in fact, as we've discussed in our podcasts. But we have a new chance. We have a new chance because of what I think is happening right now in the world and what I see happening in the country. And if you don't mind, can I run through this?
Yes, please.
Well, the first thing is actually the bad news. I don't have to tell you how bad things are out there. Almost every single human issue has suffered setbacks over the last 3 years, whether it's women's rights or the climate crisis, human rights, refugees, environment, everything. It's been going backwards, and on nuclear policy as well. And it's becoming clearer and clearer that that every single nuclear challenge the Trump administration inherited has gotten worse because of their policies. Even things that we were hopeful we might be able to see some gains, like if Trump likes Putin, can't they renew New START? Can't they get a new arms control agreement? Apparently not. He made a historic breakthrough with North Korea. Can't we make that turn into a real nuclear deal? It was there for the making, couldn't do it. Iran, could he actually negotiate a better deal? We don't, in Ploughshares, we don't support or oppose presidents. We support or oppose policy. So we were willing to back Trump on these kinds of initiatives. He's failed. The policy has failed. And what that means is that it opens up a policy vacuum. It creates space for new alternative policy. Okay, here's the second trend. There are people out there forging that new policy right now. And mostly you see this in the Congress. When the Democrats took control in 2018, it wasn't just that a new party took control of the House. It was this new type of Democrat. People who call themselves activist leaders, connected to the movements they see going around outside them. And they united with veterans like Adam Smith, chair of the House Armed Services Committee, who we've had on this podcast. And they developed alternative measures, many of which passed the House in last July and part of the National Defense Authorization Act. And we've talked about these measures. So these are the building blocks of a new policy. Stop the low-yield nuclear weapon, for example. Declare that the United States will never start a nuclear war. Cut the budget. Cut the new weapons. Renew arms control. These are the bricks that you can form for a new platform. And here's the third movement I see that I'm excited about, is that the presidential candidates are picking this up. This episode is going to air on February 4th, my daughter's birthday, by the way. But it's also, we'll have the results of the Iowa caucus. So we'll know who the leaders are. But in terms of nuclear policy, they're all good. Every single one of them. When, Elizabeth Warren just put out a tweet a couple of days ago celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the no first use bill that she introduced. Adam Smith had his companion bill in the House, bragging about the fact that she, as president, would declare that we would never use a nuclear weapon first, never start a nuclear war. When Joe Biden was asked about that policy a few months ago on the campaign trail. He said, I was for no first use 20 years before Elizabeth Warren. Typical Bidenism, right? But that shows you where these candidates are at. They're all moving in this direction. But that's not enough. Those three trends are good, but the fourth one is what really gets me and us excited, and that's the new mass movement. I've been in a lot of movements, anti-war, civil rights, labor. I've never seen the American public as mobilized as they are now. There are millions of people involved in the civic life of this country in numbers and in ways that we've never seen. You know, the largest demonstration in U.S. history, in world history, was in 1982 when 1 million people came to Central Park to protest the arms race. Until January 21st, 2017. And that's when the Women's March made history. Over 1.5 million, some say 2 million, in the streets demonstrating for a variety of issues, not one issue, a whole range of issues. And that movement, that gives me tremendous confidence that we can keep, as Franklin Roosevelt said, I'm with you on the issues, now go make me do it. And that we can keep the politicians who are making these promises, keep them honest, help push them to move these issues through Congress.
And that's what we've been trying to do. I mean, our work with organizations like Indivisible, like Move On, who like Vote Vets, who work on a variety of issues, but are willing to also include this as one of those elements. We're not out to recreate a freeze movement. We're out to join with others and stand in solidarity to get the policies that will make our world a better place.
Bing. This phrase I learned from the women's movement, intersectionality. And to see that this is how we're going to succeed with this is what, if you're a progressive, if you're woke now, what does that mean that you stand for? What does it mean? Well, you're anti-racist, you're anti-sexist. You want more action on the climate change. Are you anti-nuclear? We're close, almost. And so that's what our goal has got to be, is to have these groups see the interconnection and adopt this policy as one of the planks that they need, and we're already seeing it. One of the most exciting things for me for the last couple of weeks was to see the Sunrise Movement, these younger activists who gave us the Green New Deal, tweet out in the beginning of the month, no war with Iran. That's it. That was their tweet. But what are climate activists doing agitating on a war with Iran? Because they understand the connection. They understand that you can't get the money to do what you have to do on climate change if you're continuing these endless wars and pouring trillions of dollars. What is it, $6 trillion and counting into the Middle East wars now? That you can't have a $2 trillion nuclear buildup, which is what we have planned, and have the resources you need for climate change, or for that matter, for free community college, for Medicare for all, for any other things that this country so desperately needs. So that's the importance of the mass movement for us. And finally, here's the fifth trend, the weakest trend, which is the budget pressures are finally hitting. After increasing the deficit to record numbers, what $1 trillion deficit we're going to have in the government this year, unbelievable. The budget pressures are starting to finally hit home, and you see it even inside the administration, fights between Office of Management and Budget and the National Nuclear Security Agency over the nuclear budget. Lisa Gordon-Haggerty, the head of NNSA, wanted $3 billion more for what? For new nuclear weapons. The head of OMB said, no, you can't have it. And she issued a, you're killing me letter. I can't do this, I can't do that if you don't give me the money. Exactly. We don't have the budget to afford all these unnecessary, dangerous, genocidal weapons. That budget pressure, plus those other four trends, I think come together where we can create a new nuclear policy. And if we do it right, implement it with the new president next year, which is why, and this is to get to your question, why I want to leave July 1st. I think organizationally it's the right time to give Ploughshares a time to make the transition, to have a new leader in place that can follow through on everything we've put in motion over the last couple of years for this new moment, and then to be ready to see it through. If there's a new president, to be in a positive way to push the agenda forward, and if Trump is reelected, to be ready for the challenges that will present.
Sounds like we have our work cut out for us.
That's a lot to do in 5 months. We are an ambitious organization. If you're going to tell the President of the United States that he or she needs a new nuclear policy, you have to be bold. You have to have a big ego. And you have to be well funded. So one of the things we're doing is we've started a presidential vision fund to raise funds for this new moment. It's not just for me, but it's the idea that there is a new presidential vision out there that can be implemented with the next president of the United States, with the next president of Ploughshares, and we're trying to raise the money to make that happen.
Joe, this is not the last time we're going to talk about all of the things you've accomplished and worked on over the course of your career, but I want to take this chance to say thank you. Thanks for sitting down and talking this through with both me and the audience out there, and really looking forward to these next 5 months.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I think that's about 20 more podcasts. So,
but who's counting?
But who's counting? So we'll get to do that. And I want to thank you for what you've done for the organization and for being such a great director of programs, but also being a wonderful co-host. It's really been a pleasure to develop this communication tool with you. I also want to thank all the people who've been listening to this, especially our donors and our board members. You know, we say it all the time, we can't do this without you. And we have just a wonderful, wonderful engaged board that gives us guidance and helps us raise the money that we need to raise. And for those of you who are listening, I'm very thankful to the government officials and staffers who I've talked with over the years and who we talk to regularly every week for listening to us, for being kind enough to open your door or pick up your phone or answer your email. And while we tell you once again what we think the policy should be. and it's really, there's some great dedicated government officials out there, and they don't get thanked enough. So thank you, Michelle. It's been a pleasure going through all this, however quickly, with you today.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for listening to Press the Button. This podcast is produced by Delphine Vigil, Zach Brown, Derek Zender, Alex Spire, and Will Lowry. Sound design by Derek Zender. Audio engineering by Derek Zender and Will Lowry. Research by Alex Spire. Our theme song is by Lyrics Born and the Poets of Rhythm, sampled with kind permission. Additional music by San Francisco-based bands 17 Evergreen and the Society of Rockets. To continue the dialogue and support our work, visit ploughshares.org.